Yeah, have you ever seen a Hummer H2 off-road? Like, seriously, in real life? Aren't those things made for basketball stars and cruising the mall? Our guest today, he wheels his Hummer H2, and he's not scared to show up the Jeep boys either. Hey everyone, it's Wes from 4x4 Canada. I grew up in a 4x4 family. According to my mom, my first word was Bronco, not mum or mother. Kids had posters of girls or athletes on their walls. I had posters of monster trucks and truck pulls and mud boggers. I have over 20 years experience in 4x4 shops and many more than that in the off-road racing circles. I've been involved in 4x4 and racing clubs in BC, Alberta, and Ontario. Now I've decided to share my passion with you. I just want to remind everybody about our socials. You can check us out at 4x4canadapodcast.com. On Facebook and Instagram, we got 4x4 Canada Podcast, as well as our sister channel on YouTube at Vintage 4x4 Canada. Our guest today grew up in Florida, is now living in the BC interior. He wheels an H2 Hummer and shares his adventures on his YouTube channel called The Unexpected Off-Road. Mike, welcome to the 4x4 Canada Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be on here.
Real quick, we're just going to go through some of your social media and give that a shout out. You can check you out on the Unexpected Off-Road on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I keep them pretty updated. Yep. Post the pictures of where I've been and some of the stuff that I've gone through.
Cool. Yeah, we'll throw the links in the show notes, and we'll also mention them later on in the interview here. Now, the obvious thing is your channel called The Unexpected Off-Road because you actually four-wheel in an H2 Hummer? Or where did the name come from?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. It's, every time I take my truck out somewhere, I usually get, how did you make it here? There's no way. Like, really? Like, how did you get that truck up this trail or whatever? Like, it didn't fit. There's no way it fit, And so I was thinking hard about making a name for the channel. I'm like, well, that kind of fits. I mean, it's not, nobody expects my truck to go anywhere where it goes. Like, they don't expect it to even go a quarter of the way up the trail, not alone to the top of the trail where modified Jeeps and everything else have made it. And then the guy's too embarrassed to give you props because you made it up some trail where his modified Jeep did. And then this is a stock truck that just made it right up there. And they go, yeah, okay, well, that's definitely unexpected.
Yeah, it's definitely it's really interesting watching you wheel. I mean, you're a good driver. I've wheeled with you a lot,
Thanks.
And you're a good driver, and
that.
you know your rig. And there's been times where I haven't gone up some of the hills and stuff like that you've gone up, because I don't know, maybe you got bigger balls than I do or something. I don't know, but
I just like having fun, and sometimes I like pushing a limit. And I know, I know the limit of my truck, and I know to kind of reel it back sometimes if I need to. But there's some times where I just got to try something. I'm like, oh, that looks fun. Let me just try it once. Why not? If you try it a couple times, you don't make it, then give up on it. I'm not going to break my truck.
Yeah, no, and that's the proper way. I mean, there's lots of times that, you and I've been out and we've decided, okay, this is not going to work. We need to turn back, and it's all about being a smart wheeler as well, right? So,
yep. Yeah, and that's what's kept my truck together for so long. I still run the stock tie rods on the front of my truck because every HD truck from the 2000s, people like, oh, those things are like pretzels, they break. I still run factory ones because they're cheap.
On your H2? On my H2. I mean, you look at you look at YouTube and you search H2, and there's got to be 50 different videos about tie rod breaking.
Yep. And I've never broke a set, knock on wood. Now I set it up, I'll go to Whipsaw now and break like 3 sets. But I mean, honestly, the real reason is they're cheap. Like in Florida, it's the parts are cheaper there than in Canada. Obviously, it was like $18 for an inner tie rod for the cheapest one I could find. So I bought a set. I have a set for both sides, inner and outers on both sides. I always keep in my truck. They're still wrapped in the package from 8 years ago. I've never used them, but they're there just in case. But
no,
it's
great.
just smart, now, like you said, you got to wheel your truck smart,
Yeah. Yeah. It's not about, who's got the biggest balls or anything like that. It's, wheeling your truck smart, knowing the limits. I mean, you and I've been in some tight, situations, come back from Cabin Lake where you had less than an inch on each side, probably a half an inch on each side. Yeah. And, but you know what? You went through everywhere that, that Grant and I did as well, and you wheeled it just as you wheel it just as hard as or harder than most
And
people I know.
I always
So
get the comment like, "How did you make it through there?" Like, whatever. It's all about being calm. When you panic in a situation like that, that's when you slip off the brake pedal or the gas or whatever, and you run into the tree. So I'm always I don't know. I just get in the zone and I stay patient, and I know I can get through it.
now let's talk about this Hummer, this H2 Hummer. You moved up from Florida a number of years ago. You brought this truck with you, but it's basically just a stock Hummer, right? I mean, how many trucks come from the factory? You run 37s on that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, it's for the most part a stock H2 Hummer. There is a few things that you have done to it. What do you got on there for
Okay.
mods?
Yeah, I'll kind of go through what I got here. So basically, on the front of the truck is leveling keys, which are just clock keys, and a lot of people are like, oh, you can just wind the key up, and yeah, sure you can, but with the clock key, you get a better spring rate out of the truck in my book, and also with the clock key, the bump stops. I'm always looking at the down stops and the up stops of the suspension. That's kind of
Yep.
me and my I used to race Rachel cars, so I kind of like have that suspension in my mind, thinking about racing and how your control arms move and all that stuff, right? So basically, I have the index keys, so I have enough up travel and down travel, the max that I can have for the height, right? And then I got shock extensions on the front, Bilstein 5100s on the front of the truck, and that's been a pretty good combination. And 37s would fit on the truck without those keys. They would just rub a little more. I mean, my tires rub on full lock, but whose tires don't? you know. Um, yeah, for the front of the suspension, that's pretty much it. The rear of the suspension, I have a 1-inch block spacer under the coil spring, and that's because my springs have sagged. The truck's a 2005, so it's pretty old, and the springs, because they're progressive rate springs from the factory, and I guess that soft part of the progressive rate spring is actually sagged over the years. So I put the 1-inch block to level it out, and then I actually have airbags that go inside the spring, and that just helps when I tow with my trailer, makes it a little more stable and keeps it on the road right.
Now you mentioned a trailer. I've been camping with you, with the trailer, and with your swag tent. Let's talk about both of those that you
Yeah,
have.
so I'll start with the trailer first. That's kind of the easiest. So when you think about an off-road rig, a truck that you can take out and go pretty much wherever you'd like to go, there isn't many that can do what my truck does and tow a 4,000 or 5,000, 6,000 pound trailer to campsites and then go out and go wheeling and go to some of the hardest spots you want. That's one of the nice things about that. I tow a 19-foot R-Pod, which the R-Pod's, it's a light trailer, and it's, we go to campsites with it, and it's kind of my home base. I'll set it up. My wife likes to just hang out around the fire or whatever, and I'll go out and find some trails, kind of explore around with it. And it's comfort for us. We like, we like having a queen size bed that we can sleep in, and it's got nice, room and all the creature comforts of a pull behind trailer, which I don't know. How do you say, how do you say it up here? Is it a camper? Is it a trailer? Like
It's both. It's a camper
yeah,
trailer.
everybody's like, oh, it's not this. I don't know. It's a camper to me. But then people are like, oh, a camper's the one that goes in the bed of the truck. I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. I call it a camper, but that's just what I call it. Love it. It's been great. We've gone all over the place with it, a lot of the overland rallies and stuff, and it's been an awesome camping experience.
Would you recommend the R-Pod as a trailer?
Yeah, I would. I looked at a lot of different trailers of that size. It has a slide out, which a lot of the trailers in that size do now, but having the slide out gives you so much more room. The build quality I found of that trailer was a lot better than any other trailers that I looked at. I just, just like you can feel when you're walking in it, like if the floor is kind of weak or like the
Yeah.
drawers or like the siding of the trailer, like all that stuff seemed pretty quality to me. The downside to that trailer is the seams leak on it. So every year you almost have to redo all the seams around the trailers, around the roof and the sides and stuff, which isn't terrible to do, but it's a one-piece roof that goes front to back on the trailer. It's pretty low maintenance besides that, but yeah, I would definitely recommend the R-Pod. I'm not paid by R-Pod or sponsored or anything by them, but it's been a favorite trailer of ours. Yeah, we could always use something bigger.
Now, your tent. You and I've gone wheeling and camping, and believe it or not, it's not a rooftop tent. It's, I don't know what you want to call it.
I don't know. It works for me. It's a swag tent. I have a tonneau cover on the back of my truck, and basically my truck is wide enough that I can throw a swag tent on top of my tonneau cover and sleep up there comfortably. It gets me off the ground, gets me out of the water, gets me out of the elements. And it's sort of like a rooftop tent in a way, right? But the beauty of what I love about it is I can roll it up in one big roll with my sleeping bag and everything in it, throw it inside of my truck, and go down a really brushed in trail like Lightning Lake and not worry about getting a tree poked through the side of my tent or scratch the tent or whatever, right? I don't have to worry about it because it's inside of my truck. I'm a big guy. I sleep in it pretty comfortably. Like, I'm not claustrophobic, so it doesn't bother me. But once I'm in there, I'm going to sleep. It's not like I'm hanging out. I that's not what it's for. It's strictly for sleeping for me, not a place to hang out and read a book or whatever, right? So it works great. It's
Yeah, I should mention that, your H2 is the pickup
oh
style. So you got the four
yes,
doors, but you got
yes.
a short bed that's probably what, three
Yeah,
feet
it's
long,
it's
something like
really
that.
short. It's like three, maybe three and a half. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
a pretty short little bed. I like the look. That's why I really like that truck. Just the look of the little bed in the
Yeah.
back and gives you a little storage.
It does look good. And that swag tent just fits perfectly
Yeah,
up there.
it's
Like you couldn't ask for a better
I have
fit.
two
So
little metal brackets that I had to put on the edges because it is just a hair wider. So the brackets land the poles. So you have poles that go up through the sides that make like a hoop on the side, and then there's one main pole that
mhm.
goes across the top of the swag. But those little hoop poles, they land down on on these metal brackets that I've bolted to my tonneau cover. They're kind of like little wings that I just bolt on, and then it just sits there. And you know what?
Yeah, I know.
I've never rolled off the truck. That was my fear at first. I was fearing that like I was gonna roll over in the middle of the night and just roll right off the truck with the tent, but so far I haven't yet.
You and I don't really drink much,
That's true.
so the chances of you.
And you know what? I mean, the truck I drive is pretty unique. I like different stuff. And having a swag tent on the back of a truck, I've never seen anybody else do it. So it makes me pretty unique.
Yeah, we'll definitely post some pictures up so people can tell what we're talking about. It's a little easier to visualize it then for sure. Now, you've owned the truck since
No,
2005, right?
actually, I've owned it since
Or
2010. Yeah.
10. Okay. It's a
Yeah, it is
2005 though?
2005. Yeah, I bought it used.
Yep. Now, you bought it used when you're down living in
Yep,
Florida, right?
that's correct.
So basically, so for the listeners, Mike worked at Hummer down in Florida at one of the Hummer dealerships. You want to talk about that real
Yeah,
quick?
kind of. Maybe I can kind of give you a bit of a backstory there, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. For sure.
the Hummer brand, like I was always a fan of it. So I used to play a lot of video games when I was a kid. Test Drive Off Road was one of my favorite games to play, and there was the Defender 90, and then there was the H1, and like they would go through the mud, like it was just cool. The game, you had to be from that era to play that game and just know it. I mean, if you look back at that game now, you'd be like, oh, that's pretty lame, but back in the day for us, it was a cool game, and it was something I always thought, man, you know what, an H1, I'll never drive one. Like it's just too unattainable, too never.
Yeah.
You hardly ever see them and whatever, right? So you know, fast flash forward to it was probably 2000, I think, when General Motors bought out AM General on the H1 name, not the Humvee, but the H1 name. So we had a
Right.
sister store that was an Oldsmobile store that Oldsmobile went out right about the same time. Like they just closed it up like Pontiac and Hummer and everything else. But that was one of the first brands to be folded up basically by GM. So at that sister store was our H1 dealership. That was an actual AM General dealership that had been there since, I'm trying to think, 94. So it was one of the original, if not close to being one of the original. We weren't as early as Lynch Hummer. Lynch Hummer was one of the first stores out there, but we were a fairly early store. So basically what happened is they lost the space, so they moved this dealership into the back of our Chevrolet dealership. So, of course, they lost their technicians at the same time for some reason. I don't know why. Who knows what happened, right? So they came in a shop, and this was in 2000. Anyways, and they gathered all the guys together and asked, "Hey, who wants to be a Hummer technician?" Well, before I could get my arm up, two guys had their arms up. I'm like, man, are you kidding me? Here I had this opportunity of a lifetime, and I just missed it right in front of my face. Come on, seriously. So that was gone for about almost 2 years, about a year and a half, actually. One of the guys was doing an engine on an H1, and I forgot what he did, but something slipped and he broke his hand. Like the engine fell down and he smashed his hand really bad, broke it. And he said, "Nope, I'm not working on H1s again. This is not for me." And having the experience of working on H1s, they're very difficult. A lot of people say all vehicles are difficult to work on. There's no comprehension of how difficult those trucks are to work on. If you're mechanically inclined, you'll understand this. Every nut and bolt on the frame is a nut and bolt. There's no captured nuts. It's frustrating when you're trying to get this bolt that's in a tiny spot in the frame to stay there because it's not welded.
Yeah.
It's not, everything it's bolted together. When you do an alignment, you have to unbolt the control arms, unbolt where the shims go. It's a process to even just do an alignment. Alignment paid 8 hours on that truck.
Why do you think they did that?
It's hard to say. It's more it comes from the military, so it's designed to probably hold together, I guess, better. Maybe they were afraid that welds would break and bolts. If it's a nut and bolt, it's simple. You can just have a guy just throw a nut and bolt back in there and away you go. Where if it's welded, I guess a weld could break, type of thing. I mean, that's
could be. Yeah,
so
for sure.
Basically, in my mind, if you can work on an H1, you can work on any vehicle. If there's somebody out there that says an H1's easy to work on, you got something wrong with your head. But they are awesome vehicles. So flashback. So here I am. It comes 2002. I think it was early 2002. The H2 had came out. It was getting launched, and that guy at that time said, "Nope, I'm not breaking my hand again. There's no way. I don't care. Not doing it." So once again, they didn't have everybody in the middle of shop, but the service manager brought in every technician one at a time, said, "Hey, do you want this job?" Well, I was a young buck at the time. I had been a technician for probably 6 years at that time, 7 years. I started in 96, so you do the math, 96 to 2000, whatever. I don't know. I was a young guy at the time. So I was the very last guy they came and asked. And basically, he's like, "Hey," and he didn't tell me that. Of course, I didn't know this until later. But he's like, "Hey, we got this opportunity. You want it?" I'm like, "Well, heck yeah. Of course I want it. Why did you come and ask me first? That's my dream. To even just drive around in an H1, of course. Of course I do." So, and I didn't know this at the time. In order to work on H1s, you had to be trained. So AM General has a school technical training class that you have to go to, or you can't turn a wrench on an H1 under warranty, right? So that's how that works.
Right,
So
right.
I had no idea about this at the time. So I started working there, and then, started working. It was in the same shop, so it wasn't like I was far away, right? So anyways, about a month and a half, 2 months into it, the service manager goes, "Hey, you're going to South Bend, Indiana for training." I'm like, "What? South Bend, Indiana? Where's that?" I know Notre Dame's there. What's there? He goes, "Oh, that's where AM General is. That's what their training center is." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And knowing some training, I've been through a lot of GM training, General Motors training. And usually it's like a day, 2 days training, if that, right? He goes, "You're going for a week." I'm like, "A week? Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting." So yeah, I go there. They fly me out to South Bend, Indiana. I go there for training, and it was an entire week. The first day, I'd say the first half day was training on, different things that could break on the truck and this sort of that and that stuff, right? The next 4.5 days was all off road training on how to drive H1s off road. I'm like, what?
Awesome.
I'm like, man, I'm like, are you like, no, like, really? Like, no way. Like, this isn't, I'm dreaming or something. This is a dream job. I couldn't have possibly fell into this. Like, really? So when I was a kid, I would go with my dad. He had a dune buggy. We'd ride around in the sand dunes and things, back roads of Florida and stuff like that. And he had an old pickup truck, and we used to go around. I never actually drove. It was mostly my dad, just me riding along. So I had zero.
Yeah.
When I say zero off road experience, I'd never driven anything off road, like, at all. So I get in his truck, and the instructor is looking at me, and he goes, okay, what is it? Why are you smiling so big? What's your deal? What's going on over here? I go, man, you just don't understand. This is a truck that a few years ago when I was playing video games, I never ever thought I'd actually drive one, let alone drive on a Hummer Proving Grounds training center. Like, man, when I say this, their training center was full on rocks and water and like a full on proper off-road course to drive through.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at the guy. I said, there's like, I had no idea I would ever be able to drive one of these. And he just looks at me and goes, man, that's really awesome. He goes, okay, whatever you do, you can drive anywhere. So we'll have you go through all this place, but do not break a mirror on the truck. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's a good plan, because I don't know if you know H1s, but in that era, and most of the ones, the H1 side view mirrors are massive. Like, they stick out like Mickey Mouse ears. Like, they're big.
And the H1 is
Oh
so
yeah,
wide
they're
to
just
begin
so
with.
big, right? And I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. So, and the first obstacle we drove up was a rock ledge that, it must have went up uh 30-40 feet, but it kind of went straight. It was a proper rock ledge, and we climbed up this ledge, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, and I had never done anything like that before. And a guy looks over at me. He goes, I got a good one for you. He goes, you think you're awesome? You think like you got this now, and you're driving this truck up this hill like this? He goes, the Navy SEALs come through the same exact course, do it at night with no lights, with night vision, and drive up this fast. Oh, really? Like, that's amazing. Now they just ratcheted up another level. I'm like, so not only am I on the AM General Training Proving Grounds, but I'm on the same exact course that Navy SEALs are getting trained on. Are you kidding me? Like, what?
I can
Like,
imagine your smile, just from
this is
ear to
unbelievable.
ear.
Like, and I just was just shocked. Like, the experience was absolutely just crazy. So that was amazing. And that was a lot of fun to drive those trucks and really see what they do. And they instructed us
Yeah.
on how to drive them properly, and that sort of thing. And on the last day, this is actually kind of a cool part too. So the last day, they took us to the assembly plant where they build the H1s.
Oh, okay.
And me being me, I got to see everything. I got to know how it goes together, So I'm hanging out in the back of the pack, right? And I'm just like eyeballing everything I'm seeing, right? And at that time, the H1s were kind of a slow sell, so they weren't producing a lot. So this plant builds the Humvees and it builds the H1s all in one plant. So like, they go down the same
Right.
assembly line, even though the Humvee is like, when I say it's totally different, it's a totally different vehicle compared to an H1, because it has,
Probably
yeah, 24
24,
volt. Yeah.
probably
So
24.
the electrical
Yep.
system is
Yep.
not even close. And if you watch any of Predator Motorsports videos, and they will tell you that a Humvee, it's not worth it to convert it to an H1. It just, there's too many differences between the vehicles. So it was cool to see the
Right.
assembly plant where these trucks are being built, and we are on the assembly line. Like, we're walking down with the guy that's putting in the wiring harness and putting the body on and all this stuff, right? So
That'd
So
be cool.
once again, me being me, eyeballs here, just looking around and checking everything out. I see this little window off to the side. I'm like, ooh, what's that over there? So I peek my eyeball in there and I look, and it's an H2 with a bed. I'm like, they're making an Avalanche H2? What? I'm like, what is this? And a guy grabs me by the shirt and pulls me away from the window. Don't look at that. What do you mean? Don't look at that. Don't tell anybody about that. You're not supposed to see that truck. But it's so cool. What do you mean? No, don't. And remember now, this is 2002. Like, this is early in the H2, right? And he's like, nope,
Yep.
don't say a word. So I'm like, oh man, are you kidding me? Of course, when I got back to shop, I'm like, guys, you never believe it. I saw an H2 with a bed. They're like, no way. Like, there's no, they didn't build. They're not building an Avalanche H2. Like, they're just not doing it. And it wasn't
Yeah.
even maybe
Yeah.
3 weeks later when I come back, they announced that the concept of it. I'm like, ha, see, I knew it. So,
Yeah, the inside scoop.
which that that's seated in my brain. That's a truck I want. Like, I actually got to see the concept. Like, it's very
That's
rare that
cool.
you actually get to see a concept that's being built, or like an actual working concept vehicle. Nobody gets to see those. If you do, it's rare. Nobody gets to get their hands on it. I mean, I didn't get actually. I did get my hands on it on the second time I went for training, but the first time I went, I was like, whoa, this is just amazing. So that basically seeded in my mind that that's the truck I want. I want that the truck bed. I don't care. It looks, if you take the silhouettes of an H1 hardtop. So the H1 hardtop doesn't have the
Yeah.
canvas. It's a full hardtop that has a little mini bed, kind of the
Right.
same thing. So my truck, my H2 and that H1 sort of has the same silhouette. If you took them side by side and you just looked at the silhouette of them there, so that's why I really love that look, right? I don't care about the bed. I mean, the bed's cool, but I mean, it's just a look for me. That was awesome. I might as well flash forward a bit, but so yes, so I had a really good career at Hummer. Hummer was, I never made, I made a good chunk of change there. Let's just say that. Like, I'm a flat rate tick. I brag about, well, I don't really brag on myself much, but I do brag about this. So a flat rate technician, you get paid by the job. So like in your normal everyday
Right.
job, most everybody else, you clock in for the day, you clock out for the day, kind of thing, right? Well, as a technician, all technicians out there in the world, I mean, and I shouldn't say all, because there is some that are paid at hourly rate, but most everybody in the industry is paid flat rate. So it's by the piece job. So like if the job takes an hour and you get it done in 15 minutes, hey, you bank some money. Well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had a week where I made 97 hours in a 45-hour work week. So you do the math on that. I made, and that was
Nice.
when everything was blowing. This is like 04, 03, 04, 05. Everything was hot. Like every rap star or every pop person had an H2, right? I mean, we had a lot of celebrities. Like I worked on Shaq's truck. I worked on Tiger Woods' truck. A lot of you name it. There were so many. It got to where there were so many celebrities that we just didn't really pay attention to it because, hey, it's cool. I'm working. Yeah, it
It's
becomes
normal.
kind of normal at one point, and it's funny some of the people that I got to meet through that. One of the guys I was a pretty good friend with, when I say friend, like he would come and talk to me in the shop. Like we wouldn't hang out. We weren't like pals or something,
Right.
but an MMA fighter, Seth Petrozelli, I think he was called the Silverback. Anyways, he was an MMA fighter and he was a really fit. I mean, dude was built like, well, anyways, he was on like Ultimate Fighter and a couple of other like early on. He got famous because
Right.
he beat it was a Street Fighter guy. Shoot. I can't remember the name. Anyways, the guy was unbeatable. Well, Seth was at a fight, and he was an undercard fight. He wasn't supposed to fight the guy. Anyways, well, the fighter that was going to fight this guy backed out because I guess he thought, I'm not going to win. So why am I going to fight this guy? So anyways, Seth gets
Right.
subbed in for it. Well, he was a jiu-jitsu fighter. So those guys got extremely hard. Like their game is get you on the ground and get you in a hold and you're done.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
they'll hold you and you're not getting out of it. Right. And the guy that was, man, I wish I could think of the guy's name now. He was like a Street Fighter boxer style guy, right? You know, like that kind of guy, right? His
Yeah.
basically his blow would just knock you out. So he had set the record for the quickest bouts in MMA. I forget, it was like 10 seconds or something. Basically, they threw a couple punches and he pinned him on the ground and he could not, that's it. Couldn't get it. So he basically was famous. He had a gym and like he became super. He wrote it. He know it.
It's a big deal.
He goes,
Yeah.
he wrote it out. Like, he had a good career. He was in a spot where he wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then he kind of got snubbed because, basically he wasn't supposed to win. Well, he won. And then, you know how it is. Politics make it to where you can't fight anymore or you're not up for, anyways. I know I kind of got off subject there, but cool guy. That was my dream job. Like you come in every day and there was somebody new, some new celebrity, or I was a huge NASCAR fan, and it's funny the things you run into.
Well, you're from the
Oh yeah,
South.
I mean,
Isn't everybody in
we
the
were
South a
45
huge
minutes from
NASCAR
Daytona
fan?
National Speedway. Like let alone bike week and everything else that happens there. But yeah, I'm huge NASCAR fan, huge Dale Earnhardt fan. That's why I work on cars, because back in the day, Dale Earnhardt was Mr. Goodwrench, and I wanted to be Mr. Goodwrench as a kid. Like that's it. Like that's who I was. So, funny story is, working at Hummer, we would have a lot of race teams that would have Hummers, and then they would bring them to us because we were the closest
Right.
dealer. Like the Jacksonville and Miami were the only other dealers around. So they would bring their vehicles over to us. If they had problems, we'd fix it, whatever. So one of my
Yeah.
service writers goes, "Dude, you need to come up front right now." Really? Okay. He goes, "There's a guy I want you to meet." All right. So I go up front and meet this guy, and man, I wish I could remember his name, but he was a friend of Dale Earnhardt. And this was, so you got to remember, Dale Earnhardt passed away in 2002 at Daytona. So this was around 2006. Still was really hard for me. Like that just, that took a blow to my career as a technician. Like that's the guy I worked for, I rooted for. Like that's why I did my job, right? Hummer gave me back that passion to work on cars, because with Dale Earnhardt Sr. being gone, that was just a big part of my life that I know. I didn't really know the guy personally or whatever, but everybody, he was the working man. Everybody rooted for that guy. Like Dale Earnhardt was the man, like, in the South, right? So anyways, yeah, so
Especially
Hummer
down
gave
there.
me that
Yeah.
spark back, my basically I want to work on cars again kind of thing, right? So 2006, I meet this guy, and like I said, I really wish I could remember the guy's name. I can't. But anyways, he goes, "I hear you're a big Dale Earnhardt fan." He goes, "Matter of fact, the senior toolbox, it's red and black, like Dale's cars." Yeah, that's my toolbox. Like you got me. Yeah. He goes, "I got something in this ring box here. You're gonna want to hold." Really? Okay. He goes, "I have a Daytona 500 winning ring." Like, I'm like,
No way.
are you kidding me? Like, yes, please, can I see it? I had because that's, so when NASCAR drivers win the Daytona 500, one of the things that they get is a Daytona 500 winning ring, and the driver gets the prize, the high dollar, top of the line ring, of course, right? And then the owners get one, the pit crew guys get one, and there's a select few people. But Dale Earnhardt, this was a guy, was a really good friend of Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt had them specifically make this guy a ring that was the exact copy of Dale Earnhardt's ring. So this was
Really?
the next to the ring. So to hold that in my hand, and to kind of give you a little idea, if you're not a NASCAR fan, it took Dale Earnhardt Sr. I forget how many years it was, 25 years, 30 years to win the Daytona 500. Like that was the biggest deal in racing of anything ever. Like he had a seagull hit his
Yeah.
car and took the radiator out, tires blow out before ever winning a race. So, and when he won that race, every person in NASCAR came to pit road and gave Dale Earnhardt a high five because that's how big of a deal. That's the equivalent of Michael Jordan not winning a game for 20 years and then winning one, and everybody's just like, "What? This is amazing," you know. So it was a that 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 was a
That's
pretty
awesome.
big deal to hold that ring, and that was pretty amazing. I did get to hold. Man, I'm going too far in a rabbit hole here. If you stop me if you need me to go, but so the other cool thing was we had baseball players, football players, you name it. I
Yeah.
can't even remember some of them. Anyways, we had a guy that was on. This is another cool one. He was another guy that would come in and talk to me a lot, and he was a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. Well, he was a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, and man, don't hold me to this. I think it was 03. 02, 03, somewhere around there. They won the first World
Right.
Series. Like Red Sox had that, what was it, Babino curse or something, to where they,
The
where
Dale
they had
Earnhardt
some kind
curse.
of. I mean, the Red Sox are I think one of the original Major League Baseball teams, right? And they had
Yeah.
never won a World Series, so it was a big deal. Well, this guy was on the team. I don't think he was. I think he was like a second up, kind of runner up guy to.
Right.
Yeah, he wasn't
Second
like the
line, yeah.
main pitcher, but he was there. He played in the games. Like he subbed in and definitely played in the games. So guess what he
Yeah.
had? The World Series ring. I got to
He
hold
had the
that
ring.
too. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, as a kid, I was a huge baseball fan, and when I got older, I wasn't as much into baseball, but to hold a World Series ring like that, that was pretty
That's
cool.
cool.
And of course, I had him autograph a baseball for me and stuff like that. And like I said, we were pretty
Yeah.
good friends. And then another kind of same thing. So we had a guy from the Pittsburgh Steelers that lives in Orlando. Man, I can't remember his
Yeah.
name. No, like I said, it's hard for me to remember names. But anyways, he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers. He came and bought. So Hummer had a special silver edition truck. That was limited edition truck. They called it Silver Ice, which is the Steelers colors, of course, right? Well, the Steelers,
Right.
they were playing in Tampa at the Super Bowl. And I can't remember if they won that year or not. But anyways, this guy had been on the team for years, and he had bought that truck. Well, he came into the dealership and talking to everybody and saying hello and shaking people's hands. Super nice dude. Guess what he had? He had the Super Bowl ring. I got to hold that
The
ring
ring.
too. It's like, man, this is like really. I got the trifecta of rings in my hand almost. Like
No
that's
doubt.
that's one of the side note cool things. Like just to give you an idea of what this job was more than a job to me. It was you're living it, right, kind of thing. And just the people you met, and it was just a cool experience.
Yeah.
And the other part of the job is I haven't gotten to this part either. So what makes Hummer unique from any other manufacturer's ever built off-road vehicles, and I'm talking Jeep, Land Rover, you name it. Maybe there's a few out there that did this, but I don't know of any other car manufacturer that 2 times a year paid us technicians to take customers out off-roading on trails and show them how to drive the trucks. Like, I don't know of any other car manufacturer or anybody that ever, even, I don't think Land Rover does that. Land Rover they do have training.
They've got their little training things, yeah, but they don't
And we had
take
the same
people out,
thing.
I don't think.
We had a rock course at our dealership that was more extreme. You couldn't drive a Land Rover over it. They wouldn't make it. They wouldn't make the first ledge, and then we had
Right.
man, I wish I could remember all the stats on it. We had a really steep hill you could drive up and over on it, and which that sold trucks, man. People get on that course and they go over it, and oh, okay, sold, done. So I don't know of any other manufacturer that did that. So they paid us each day. We went out for 4 days, and they paid us basically to just we took a brand new stock unit trucks right off the lot, and we went
Yeah.
out and beat on them just like everybody else. If we scratched them, if we whatever, they fixed them and they sold them. General Motors paid us to go do that. Like, it wasn't the dealership.
That is
This
awesome.
was General Motors actually
Yeah.
paying us twice a year. It was mandatory for a Hummer franchise to put on these events. And we would have the
Yeah.
biggest event we had, and I'm not kidding you, and I'm not exaggerating because it was a lot of work. We had 100 trucks. And if you've ever done any kind of off-road, that's a lot of Hummers. And if you've ever done any kind of off-road group trail rides, having 30 trucks is a lot. Having 100, we had 3 groups. We split up 3 groups, and it took us all day to get everybody through one trail. Like, it was
100 trucks with
it.
newbie drivers.
And we had one mud
Right.
hole that it was a road that was in Florida that was always known for having lots of mud on it. And there was one good mud hole that every person got stuck in, and we pulled them out. And they didn't care. Like, that was their off-road experience, right? Like, I got my truck stuck in a mud hole and I got pulled out, and like, this was amazing. Like, you know, to us off-road guys, it would be just like, oh, okay, it's just another little kind of mud hole. It was fun to drive through. But to the average customer, it just blew their mind. Like, they're like, I have this vehicle that I spent all this money on that actually can do this stuff, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. I thought it was unique. Like, I don't know if anything.
That's cool. That's different. You know, they've, you know, there's the Jeep Jamboree, and there's, you know, Land Rover's got their little thing, but there's nothing where, like you say, your guys are paid to take them out,
and that's
right?
why they sent us to the training center to get trained for off-road, you know, stuff, recovery, and how to tell people how to drive and stuff like that. I mean, it like I said, dream job, like ding 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 for me, like, you know. So
yeah, no doubt.
I'll kind of wind down that story. I know we got kind of sidetracked a bit here, but yeah, I know we
have a habit of doing that.
So in 2008, I got to go to Hummer training again. Once again, a week of training. Well, now the H3's out. We got the H2. We got the H1. So this one was a bit different. So we had a technical day the first day, which was just, you know, service bulletins and how to repair stuff and just basically technical stuff that we always do. So then the next 4 days was recovery training. So we got to stick.
Because
yeah,
of the
right.
H3?
Well, you know, it's funny because the H3 Alpha had just came out right when I went to school up there. So if you're not familiar with the Hummer brand, an H3 Alpha, and most people do not know this, the H3 Alpha is a truck you do not discount. It has a V8. It's got a V8.
That's a V8.
It's got front and rear lockers. It's got a 4:10 crawl ratio, or 4-to-1. Is that right? What's the same as Rubicon? Yeah, 4-to-1. 4-to-1. So
4-to-1. Yeah.
Like, in my mind, better than a Jeep. Like, I'll say it. Like, come on. Like, Jeep didn't have a V8 at the time. To have a V8, front and rear lockers, good clearance. They came with, I think, 33s from the factory, but you could pop 35s on them, and they were just fine. I've seen guys even run 37s. They rub a little bit, but you could run a 37 on an H3. So having front and rear lockers, that was a game changer. And a V8, that's one of the most valuable trucks right now. Like, if you could find an H3T or an regular H3 Alpha, they're just getting.
I think it's an H3T Alpha down in Vancouver.
Yes, one of my friends, Robert, he just did a solid axle swap on the front of that thing. Man, and
that's what I thought.
It is a beast.
That's got to be a beast.
And the funny thing about the H3T, so if you're not familiar once again with Hummer, it is basically a Gladiator 10 years before the Gladiator ever came out. And the funny thing is, and I'll harass people about this, it didn't sell very well. Like, when it first came out, everybody's like, oh yeah, Hummer with a full bed. That's cool. And then, like, it sold good for about 2 or 3 months. And then they just did not sell at all. Like, they just didn't. Honestly, they're not as good off road because of the width, right? The wheelbase, right? The breakover is sort of terrible on those trucks, but they were unique, and it was just funny that the popularity of the Gladiators, let's face it, it's super popular, right? And it's just funny that 10 years ago nobody
Yeah.
wanted that truck, right? Now they all want it. But it's basically, if you look at them, they're the same, basically the same truck, right? But Gladiator hasn't had a
Yeah.
V8 in it, at least not yet. And it had a V8 10 years ago in that
I'm
in an
sure it's
H3
coming.
truck. So, anyways, once again getting sidetracked. So, got to go for training. So, each truck we had to stick in the mud and then recover it 3 different ways. So, you had like your just a strap. We didn't have kinetic ropes at that time. I don't think they were even out. 2008. I don't think
Probably
so.
not.
Anyways, they were just the old style, like, recovery straps. So just pull somebody out of mud with a recovery strap, and then a winch line pull, and then like a winch line with a block and tackle, or I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah.
I should say snatch block. Yeah.
Snatch
And we
block.
actually had a double line and a triple line pull on. So like we did go pretty into it, pretty good. And yeah, each truck. So an H2, H3, H1, sink it to the axle in the mud, recover it, which that was awesome. That was like something I never done. We always done simple recoveries. You just hook a rope and pull somebody out, right? So
Right.
that was really cool.
Yeah.
So basically, once again, at the end of the class, when you got to the end, we got another little surprise. We got to go to the H2 assembly plant. So this is a rare occurrence because it's one thing to get into an AM General plant. Like AM Generals, I'm not going to say they're loose on stuff. But they were just as tight as GM, but GM you do not get into their plants. Like I don't know any. I mean, I know some people that may have gotten into them, but they were either work for GM or whatever. You do not get, like, that's a lock and key kind of place. So to get into this place, it took about almost an hour, believe it or not, because they took your phone, they took your camera, they took everything, they searched your pockets. Like I mean, it was like an interrogation just to get in this place. So we get in there, and the first room you walk into was actually pretty cool. They had the very first H2 off the assembly line. It was white, and every single assembly line worker signed it. So that's cool. I don't even know, that truck's got to be in a museum somewhere because this factory is long gone by now. But we got into, like I said, we got into the plant, and as we're walking through the plant, you don't get very far into it, and I notice there's nothing going on. Like, they're not working on, and this is in the middle of the week. This is during the work week. And it's like, why isn't there, like, they're not building trucks? What? And this is 2008. And I'm like, what's going on? And the guy that was showing us through wouldn't tell us. He's like, oh, well, just avoided the question. Why is, don't worry about that part. Well, you're getting the opportunity to go through here. Just be happy with it. Okay, sure. So literally, we were walking on the assembly line plant, and you could pick up and touch everything. Like, I mean, you're standing there, and there's a box full of AC control heads, and you're looking at them, and you can see where the guy just grabs the control head and puts it in the truck, and all the other different parts. And then we got down to where the body was getting put together, and I thought that was, so it's got the floor pan. And they got robots to do all the welding and, all that sort of stuff, right? Well, it was stopped midstream. Yeah. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen. So it looked like a transformer. Like, all the body panels were just kind of blew apart. And it was in the process of putting the panels together, right? And making the body of the truck. And then the other robot comes in and does all the little crazy, the welds and things like that. But to see, I've never seen anything like that. To see the structure and to think, how is that even, like, it just looks like panels. How does that structure even work? Like, when it's together, it can flip over and roll over and not crush people. It's got to be safe, right? But it's just, to see the metal in that state was just really neat to see that. And like I said, just the panels all coming together and getting bonded and welded. A lot of stuff is bonded. Some of the stuff is welded, but. So the only part of the plant we couldn't go through was the paint. they wouldn't let us in the paint room, which that's one of the things as a
Right.
kid I always wanted to see.
Understandable though.
Like, how do they get the paint on a truck so perfect? I mean, okay, GM's paint jobs aren't the perfect in the world. Their orange peel is sometimes pretty bad, but just I wanted to see the process of it, how they work. But the only thing that we could see
Yeah.
was that they had tanks where they take the trucks and they dip them in the solution and then the primer and then But we didn't get that
Oh,
far.
okay.
They wouldn't let us into that part of it, but. I don't know if I never even got a chance to even ask if any of the other classes that were there got to go through the same tour that we did. I don't think they did. I think that when they brought him in there, oh
So why
yeah,
did they shut it
I didn't
down?
get to that part yet. Yeah,
Like what?
so in 2008, that's when they announced that Hummer was gonna be wound down. Like that was going to be the end.
Yeah.
And actually, the day I got back from that trip, it came out in the news. It was leaked, kind of a thing, right? That Hummer was going to be done basically because high gas prices at the
Yeah.
time and just social pressure and just, the hate that there was for Hummer. There was a lot of hate. A lot of people didn't like him. I mean, and just environmentalists didn't like him and, a lot of issues.
It's so you guys are probably the
I was
last tour to go through there.
the very last class to go through the AIM General Training Center, and then probably one of the last groups to go through and actually tour the plant. And that's why. And I just at the time, I instantly kind of think about things, right? I'm just thinking to myself, those poor people are going to lose all their jobs there, right? Like, that they depend on that, right? And that's, I don't even know how many workers are in that plant, but it just was kind of a sad day to think about that. And, it is what it is. They built the trucks for another, year and a half. So 2009 was the last H2. And there were very few of the 2009s built. Like, I mean, the numbers are pretty small. But if you can get a 2009, they're worth a lot of money. Any H2, because they had the better.
Yeah, no
so
doubt.
Basically, 2008 and 2009, they upgraded the interior of the H2, which doesn't squeak like the older ones did. Mine, man, a sidebar note. So I have music all the way through my videos, my YouTube videos. The reason why I have music through all of my YouTube videos is because all the panels squeak in my truck. Eek, 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 eek. Every little bump, they scratch and make noise, and so I put a little bit of music in there always to kind of mask that, right? So that's my little trade secret. But if if anybody's ever driven any kind of GM vehicle from that to 2000s, you just know the interior squeaked and they weren't the best built. 2008, they definitely stepped the game up and they were trying to go more premium. I think the problem with the brand at the time, I think they just got out of touch. They didn't keep on top of it. They could have came out with a hybrid. They could have came out with a diesel. Like there was so many different things they could have done to save the brand. That just they got behind the ball, and then the bailout happened with all the car manufacturers, and that's a whole nother story.
Right.
I think Hummer was targeted along with Pontiac and all the other Saturn. They just saw as something to just axe and get rid of, and the reasonings I never really got. Just like, I mean, I don't want to get too far down the hole here, but we're pretty far down the hole. But I lost my job 2010. Let's see, it was basically late 2009, 2010. Dealership was no more. Like it's done. Like, and brand is
the brand is gone.
My
so
job
the
is
dealership's
gone.
gone.
At the point, it was just too heartbreaking. Like when you see your dream job kind of crumble in front of you, you got to kind of pick up the pieces and just move on. And that's, I ended up going to other dealerships and things, and it never, honestly, nothing ever held a candle to that job. Like
getting back to wheeling, I know that you're an active member of the Four-Wheel Drive Association of BC, very active member in your area. One of the things that you do in the Okanagan is your meetups. So you want to let's fill us in about that. I think you've actually got one coming up
Yeah.
next week, but what are they and how do people find out about them?
So basically, I took over some of the role in my area of the Four Wheel Drive Association is kind of promoting it, basically, right? And I was trying to figure out a way. I'm like, oh man, how can I get people together and just have a good time and stuff like that? And I know I'm not saying I invented the idea, not by any means, like right, but always saw the supercar things where the people have cars and coffee, and all the hot rods and stuff like that. And I was like, man, why can't there just be a full of driving coffee? Like, why not? Like, perfect. And so that's kind of where my idea started, and it was kind of to just promote the Four Wheel Drive Association and just get people together and have a good time. And usually we're in a parking lot somewhere, and it's just we talk about our trucks and talk about where we're going to go next and cool projects we might do and trail runs that we're going to come up to and maybe do. And we usually have them. Well, last summer before, let's just say before COVID ever happened, I was doing them twice, let's see, every 2 weeks. So basically every 2 weeks we have a meetup, and it worked out pretty well. I haven't got back to that yet. But it's been kind of random just because I've been kind of busy at my YouTube channel and other things in life just kind of getting away. But yeah, I usually plan. Now, this one that we have coming up next week is Jeep Okanagan. I actually one of their meet and greets. So I just kind of tag along on that. And
Right. And I mean, that one will be, over by the time, the podcast goes out, but how do people find out about, future
so we
ones?
have a Facebook page. It's for WABC Okanagan is our local page.
Yeah.
And that's where you'll find our meetups and our trail runs and we have cleanups too. We post them on that page so everybody can know about them, basically.
Yeah. You guys just had a big
Yeah,
cleanup
we had a big
recently, right?
cleanup here. King Eddie FSR. Short story to kind of explain it. It's a well-traveled road. There's a lot of, I call it abuse. A lot of just dumping trash, people, firearms, shooting at stuff, and other things that happen out there, and just stuff gets left behind. And there's some people that live out in the bush, out in the back country, that will live. Basically, what happens is they set up a sort of a camp, and they'll live there all summer until snow comes. And then once snow comes, they just leave everything behind. So they leave a giant mess that we go in and clean up and try to, make the environment friendly again and just get that stuff out of there that just doesn't need to be there. And it's a shame to see that happens and we have to do it, but it's one of those things you volunteer and do. And I don't want to get any I mean, I don't like, it's not my goal to get all this recognition out of it. It's just more to do it just because it has to be done. Right.
And you've also done a bit of work with the Wheeling Wisely program as
Yeah.
well, too,
So
right?
what Wheeling Wisely is, it's a training program how to drive your off-road vehicle responsibly. And the other side to it, so it's a 2-day course basically. The other side is how to recover your vehicle in a safe and proper way. So basically, it's a beginner course for off-road driving, and we teach you how to properly put your truck into four-wheel drive and lockers and when to use them and that sort of stuff. And we've actually had experienced guys come and take the class, and it's almost like a refresher, like if you're a guy that drives in mud all the time, right? Like you're a mud bogger kind of guy, right? And all of a sudden you decide, oh, you know what? I might want to go rock crawling, and you're not real familiar with it, but you kind of want to do it. You take a course like this because we kind of cover a broad range of all different things that you drive on, right? So you basically get a
Mhm.
refresher in your mind of, hey, you know what? Oh yeah, I used to do it this way, or that's the right way to drive over these rocks, or don't basically make giant ruts when you try to go through the mud. And it's basically it's basic training for off road.
I've always said that people, when they buy a different vehicle, they should drive that vehicle stock for a year or so to learn the vehicle. And I know every time, whether I've gone from my lifted TJ to my Xterra to my Tacoma, I've had to learn how to drive all over
Yeah,
again.
yeah, that's it.
And refresher courses, whether you're with a new person or whether you're, experienced, these courses are very valuable to, especially the
Oh yeah,
recovery
you
stuff.
can
Um,
the recovery stuff, you can really get yourself hurt pretty quick if you're not paying attention. And also, you can get yourself into really bad situations if you're not paying attention, where you're pulling something, or just properly how to get something back on the trail, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The Four-Wheel Drive Association of BC has, the Wheeling Wisely course as well, and or is that's one of their many things that they do. And I think, give a shout out to the association, and their website is 4wdabc.ca, and that has all the information where people, if you are interested in the Wheeling Wisely course, that's all there. And as well as there's a calendar of events for any upcoming events, whether it be down the coast or in interior or up north. One of the things that has really come to light lately with efforts from yourself and others in the area is that the Four-Wheel Drive Association BC is not just a Lower Mainland thing. Yeah, a lot of people involved are from the Lower Mainland, but we have a lot of good members in the Okanagan and the Kamloops area, as well as Prince George. There's a lot of we're sort of spread out
Yeah,
all over
and
kind of ideas.
if
So
people that are not from our area, like if you're from what's the far east, Nova
Nova
Scotia, right? You
Scotia,
don't know much about
Newfoundland,
BC, right?
yeah,
BC is big. It's a big territory, right? Province, sorry, province, right? So I forget.
yeah,
Man, somebody was telling me how many different states you can actually fit inside of BC, and it's crazy. Like it's huge.
it's
It's a
huge.
big area.
Yeah,
So the Four-Wheel Drive Association covers all of BC. So and it's huge.
like
You
it's
know,
just
it's funny because we got a lot of friends here, and like Wes is, let's see, what, are you, almost 2 hours from me, roughly. And
yeah,
I
something
have a
like that.
lot of
Yeah,
friends that are like 4, 5, 6, 7 hours away, and they're still in the same province. Like it's like, dang it, we can't meet up because we're so far away from each other. That's the hard part about here, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, or you meet up with them once a year, and
Yeah,
that's
no,
about it, right?
that's
So,
just it.
but no, the associate Full Drive Association does a good job. There's it is for being such a big province, it's not just a coastal thing anymore. I think it was for or seemed that way
Yep.
for a long time, but there's been a lot of people working to change that. I mean, we've got the first section of the Alexander Mackenzie Trail. We've got 3 forest fire lookouts that we maintain, as well as I think we're something like 18 rec sites or something. So the association has done a really good job, and it's always expanding, but that's due to key volunteers, or
Yeah, and
actually all their
that's
volunteers,
something you
right?
got to
So
remember about this association is everybody's a volunteer. Like there's no paid. There's
yeah,
I think they've brought up maybe they might pay like a treasurer or something, to keep the legal side of it on track. But everything else is
yeah,
all volunteer. Like when I go and do the Wheeling Wisely the weekends, that's all volunteer. Like I'm there like on my own dime. I love helping people out, and
yep,
it's volunteer work, right? Volunteer work, you don't expect anything in return. That's the best version I could.
exactly. Now, just about to wrap up here, but can you give everybody a shout out in regards to your social media? Like we'll put links in the show notes, but if you can just give us a shout out as to what your social, where they can find you on
Yeah.
social media.
So basically, I'm on Instagram at the Unexpected Off Road. My Instagram is pretty. I'm on that quite a bit. Like I said, I'll post pictures of where I'm currently at, or sometimes I'll do a throwback photo and stuff like that, and short little videos on there. Instagram is definitely big for me. I am on Facebook at the Unexpected Off Road. But I'll tell you, my Facebook just mirrors my Instagram. My Instagram is kind of my main. I hate Facebook. I just try to get away from as much as I can. But it's a good way for me to meet people still. So I still do that. And I'm still active on there. Of course, my YouTube channel, The Unexpected Off Road. I'm about to drop another video here pretty soon. And I got to get more consistent and getting more content out so I can grow my channel. But sometimes life gets in your way, and you just got to deal with what's in front of you, right?
I hear you. Yeah, I definitely recommend people checking out the Unexpected Off Road on YouTube. Mike, it's really neat seeing an H2 out in the wilderness and away from the malls. And there's a lot of areas that people may not see. And now you
Yeah,
got
the
your
drone
drone,
makes a huge
so
difference. Like
that's
it's definitely gives a different perspective, right?
yeah, exactly, totally. Last question for you: who would you like to hear in an interview on the 4x4 Canada podcast?
Well, you know what? Because I think he's an interesting guy. Forestry.
Yo, yes, Forestry
Yes,
Forestry
that
on
guy is
YouTube. Yes,
interesting.
he
Totally,
is.
just totally interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. He's for the listeners that aren't aware, he's got a YouTube channel, Forestry Forestry, and he travels around in his full size van, camperized van, and so there's a lot of hiking in there, and there's some camping and stuff like that. But very interesting gentleman. He gets into some of the history of the areas that he's in BC. Yeah, just a very very interesting
I'm
individual
not sure where he's
for
located
sure.
out of. I know he's so 97 Customs did some builds, and 97 Customs is local to me here in Vernon. But I'm not really. I mean, obviously he lives in his van full time, but I don't know where he is.
Mhm.
Somewhere around BC, so I don't really know where he normally hangs out at. But let's just say that.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's a good idea, and I think I'll definitely hit him up because like you said, I find him to be a
I
very
got another
interesting
one for you
individual.
that's pretty good. Destination
Yeah.
Adventure. Have you, that guy drives an RV
Yes.
around. Another super like he's just entertaining to me, and he goes fishing, and he goes all these different places around BC, and like another interesting.
Yeah, he's based out of Williams Lake, and yeah, he's based out of Williams Lake, BC, and yeah, he's been down to Mexico and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. He travels around this big RV. Like it's not a small RV. We're
Yeah,
talking like a big, the big ones kind of idea. And he's got a little boat behind him, and his little bike, and very does a lot of for listeners that aren't aware of him. He does a lot of
yeah,
abandoned places,
yeah. It's cool.
and which is something that both Mike and I love. I mean, if we could be out exploring off the beaten path, abandoned areas
Oh
every
yeah, for
day, we'd
sure.
be doing it if we could
Yeah,
afford the
we get a
gas.
Brinks truck behind us.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to the electric
Yeah,
vehicles,
I,
right?
I know. I know those two guys aren't really kind of an off road thing, but they're just some super interesting guys.
And the whole thing with podcasts, it doesn't have to be off road per se, but I mean, when you think about it, most of your 4x4 vehicles these days spend 90% of their
Yeah,
time on pavement. Even myself, my Tacoma is my daily driver, and I go out on the weekends, and even a lot of my stuff on the weekends is Forest Service roads, and it's I use some more hardcore off road stuff, but in reality, it still spends 89% of his time on the
yeah,
pavement. So, but it's the fact they're getting out there and they're exploring these areas off the beaten path. Doesn't necessarily have to be 4x4
yeah.
access, but it's they're looking at history. They're looking at these abandoned areas, or these they're involved some hiking and stuff like that, which us two older, heavier set guys may
Hiking
not be the
straight up a
best
hill
at,
to a
but
waterfall.
exactly.
So
We do have some really interesting, or we do have some really good guests coming up. We have Steve McCrossan, who just finished the Nora race down in Mexico. He's a Canadian off-road racer out of Ontario, and we've got a couple more Canadian YouTube people coming up as well too. But that's one thing we're trying to get is a variety of people from all
yeah,
across
that's
the
great.
nation. So if any of the listeners want to be guests on, just give me a shout, contact me, or if you know somebody that you think would be really interesting to listen to. I think anywhere from BC to Nova Scotia to Yukon, and there's so whether it's racing or
Yeah,
four wheeling, or we definitely want to do some interviews with some of our elders have been around for years and that. So we got some pretty exciting stuff coming up.
let me just kind of wrap some things up here. So we didn't. There were some things
Yeah.
we didn't get to talk about, but I'll just do a quick one here. So Wes is one of the very first people that I off-roaded with here in Canada when I first moved here. Like I showed up at the time, it was Kamloops Off-Road Club, I believe. 4x4 Club. And
Kennels
it was the
4x4
only one
Club.
I could
Yeah.
find that was
Yeah.
local to me. I couldn't find anything up here in Canada when I first moved here. And I got to tell you, the Kamloops guys, along with Wes, are the most friendliest guys you'll ever meet, and you'll have the most fun hanging out with and wheeling. They don't care what you drive. Like, it doesn't matter to them what kind of vehicle you have, but they just want you to come out and have a great time. And every time I've been out with them, it has been just a fun time and just welcome with open arms. And they've been great to me. So big thanks to you guys. Like, Canada's a friendly
Oh,
place. It really, truly is. And you guys definitely made it that for me.
well, no, I appreciate that for sure. And I know I got to get over, your area. We're only a couple hours away, and you keep on coming over this
Yeah.
way. I got to get over your way, and we got to hit some of those
Yeah, for
fire
sure.
lookouts of there. So that's in my plan for
Yeah.
August and September. So cool. Awesome, Mike. I appreciate it. Once again, Mike from the Unexpected Off Road, and
Awesome. Thanks for
we will
having me.
chat soon.